I'd like to bring this meeting to order.
Okay.
It is Wednesday, August 15th. We are at the Carson City Community Center Sierra Room. Would you all rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Roll call, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Got ahead of myself. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll?
Chairperson Law.
Here.
Vice Chair Val. Member Barrett.
Here.
Member Golden.
Here.
Member Harris.
Here.
Member Harvey.
Here.
Member Rogers.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. Would you rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item C, approval of the minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority. I would entertain a motion to accept, first of all, are there any changes or corrections or amendments to the draft minutes as submitted? I saw none.
I saw none. Doesn't matter.
I would accept a motion to approve the minutes of the July meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Harris? Mr. Bennett? Barrett, sorry.
I'll answer that.
Yeah. Modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves...
Vote on that?
Oh. I'm going to apologize right up front.
I got it.
The railroads.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I want to apologize right up front. My mind is not necessarily here. I lost my brother a couple weeks ago, as you lost your mother, and it has been a stressful time. But with that being said, any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard. Moving on. I did receive a phone call from Vice Chairman Val at 20 minutes after 5 stating that he would be unable to attend tonight, and I did want to add that to the record. Moving on to item D, modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda items. Items may be taken out of order. Items may be combined for consideration by the authority. Items may be pulled or removed for the agenda at any time. At this time, I would like to read a statement regarding item G1 into the record. Prior to August 2nd, the airport manager was advised by the landlord of Carson Aviation Adventures, Carson Aviation Academy, a wholly owned subsidiary of Pier 28 Incorporated, that the Class 2 FBO was significantly in arrears in payment of rents, and the landlord for the building rents to the landlord for the building the tenant was using for the flight school under Carson City Airport Authority business application dating from 2016. There have been numerous calls and emails to and from affected parties, the airport manager, Mr. Takis, and myself since that date. The tenant alludes that a rent check was tendered and cashed. However, he has apparently moved his business furniture and fixtures and quit the building. The landlord indicates the tenant continues to owe significant arrearages. The landlord-tenant concerns in this situation, in my opinion, should not and cannot be heard or adjudicated by this body or discussed publicly in anticipation of potential legal activities ensuing between the parties. As was described to the tenant by our airport manager in emails dated August 2nd and 7th under Carson City Municipal Code 1902, 020-350, Section 7, subparagraph E, Class 1 FBOs must have sufficient space leased from a Class 1 FBO to accommodate office or classroom activities. Title 19 does not provide for off-airport alternatives. After researching the original agreement and checking airport records, our airport manager emailed the tenant to advise the FBO tenant was not in compliance with the minimum requirements for a Class 2 operator, and he was in arrears on fees owed to the Carson City Airport Authority under the 2016 agreement as well. Therefore, the authority will table this item until the September meeting to allow time for the landlord-tenant issues to be resolved between the parties, and in the alternative to give the tenant a 2-week opportunity to cure his arrearages with CCAA and negotiate and obtain space from a Class 1 FBO at the Carson City Airport, and to reapply for Class 1 FBO status with the authority in the name of Carson Aviation Adventures under the company's current structure and ownership, which is different from Pier 28 Incorporated mentioned on the original application, and which would reflect a different responsible person than was listed on the original application. Current financial, banking, and other information would be required as provided in Title 19 as well. Public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires extended discussion, please request the chairman to calendar the matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. Item F, awards and presentations. There are none, so we will move on to item G, public hearings. And as noted, we will skip item 1. Item 2, for possible action, discussion of master plan airport facility alternatives in order to provide consultant with a recommended development concept. Mr. Fitzgerald or Mr. Moen, which would care to present this item? Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Brian Fitzgerald with Atkins Airport Engineers. Mr. Moen and I, airport manager, we had a phone call with Kaufman Associates on July 20th to discuss the alternatives that was presented in the master plan chapter. I believe it was chapter 4. And during that conversation, we had a few modifications just in the configurations of the taxiway connector locations, slightly closer or slightly farther than what's shown in those exhibits, which I included in my engineer's report for your reference. And then we laid out what was the preferred and the secondary alternatives in the memo that Mr. Moen has put together for us. And we just wanted to let the board know this is based upon our conversations with y'all and what we've had feedback and comments and so forth, that these were the preferred alternatives. I just wanted to make sure that you were all good with those, and if so, then we would forward that off to Kaufman so that we can implement those changes to the roadway and taxiway configurations and moving forward with land acquisitions and so forth. So at this time, is there any additional comments for all those items on the master plan?
Any questions?
My only addition is that I circulated the letter that's in your packet dated August 7th as a draft for comment. At this point in time, I don't have significant changes to make. I'll update the letter to reflect current date and submit it with your blessing to Kaufman Associates.
Any questions of Mr. Moen? Hearing none, I would move that we recommend options as outlined by staff as the authority's preferred option for the master plan alternatives. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Rogers. Seconded by Mr. Harris. Any discussion on the motion? None heard?
Any public comment?
Any public comment on the motion or on the item? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard? Motion carries. Moving on to item G3 for possible action to approve the leasehold lot line adjustments to parcel 219B. Mr. Takis, would you like to start this?
Yes. As you know from prior meetings, there is a sprinkler riser room area that Mr. Giangreco planned at the south end of his buildings, which extends into the fire and utility access way. I understand that he has provided a letter from the fire marshal or the fire chief saying that it's not a problem, the intrusion's not much, it won't block the fire equipment. And so the next step would be to amend his lease so we can amend the boundary, do a lot line adjustment to add the 2 additional riser rooms, 1 at each row of the hangars. To that end, he engaged Manhart Engineering or Manhart Construction, Consulting, excuse me, to put together the legal description. However, as the airport engineer explains to me, it doesn't match up with the legal descriptions that we use to describe his parcel. And so Mr. Fitzgerald's team is talking to their team, trying to work out, okay, how do we make this right and fix it? The end result is a 9-foot by 9-foot square area added to the end of the buildings. And if you add up the rent that would be due to us, it's about $20 a year. So it's not a big rental change, but we should still have an amendment reflected. I reached out to Mr. Giangreco by email earlier, I don't remember if it was the end of last week or beginning of this week, asking if he had drafted an amendment or had something ready to go. I have not heard back from him. So I think for 2 reasons, we should probably postpone this item to the next meeting so that they can work out the correct way to describe the legal description, and also so that he has time to put together a lease amendment, or if he's going to ask me to do it, I'll do it. And as with all stuff like that, I will expect the airport manager to bill that back to him. There is one other strange thing in here that I didn't understand, and I'll just mention it to you. The gentleman from Manhart indicated that they were not planning on doing a lot line extension until they filed the final map. I think we need to look into that, because I thought the procedure was you filed a final map before you started construction. And so if there's some second final map or some other process going on, I think that's something that we should know about. And certainly the airport manager should be informed about it. So with that, I would request that this item be moved to the next meeting.
Any questions of Mr. Takis? Any public comment on this item? Mr. Moen.
Chair Law, I only want to comment in the context that, from what I understand from planning, that being that this is a condo association, they do the utilities first, and then once that, all the dirt work is approved, then they submit the final map. So I don't think until that step is done that they can do that. But I think we're in the wheelhouse as far as the time frame's concerned. And I believe they are expecting to get the permit to go vertical here in the next week or 2. So that should allow them to get the final map submitted.
Okay, so are you in agreement with postponing this until the next agenda?
Absolutely. I don't think there's a rush on this piece. And then this will come to the board again for an adjustment as well for the heritage hangars. When they were built, they had a similar situation where they did construct a riser room outside their leasehold. So to bring their documents and their legal descriptions to reflect the actual leasehold, that'll also be adjusted. So that'll come up before the board as well.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or question on this item before I obey it to next month? Seeing none, so obeyed. Okay, moving on to item G4 for possible action, accept the FAA grant, AIP project number 3-32-032-2018. Mr. Fitzgerald.
As we had in prior meetings, we submitted grant applications for the taxiways projects and taxiway project and for the AWAS, and the FAA combined those 2 grants, projects into one grant. So previously, the Airport Authority has accepted and sent off to the Board of Supervisors one level of a grant, and now we need to move that up to what was currently given to us at approximately $384,000. So this one grant will cover both projects, and just looking for the board to approve that grant.
Just break it out, how much is for which?
It's 32,906 for the AWAS and 352,000 for the taxiway job.
I just want to get that on the record.
Mr. Golden?
Upgrade the AWAS and it'll be fully functional this year?
That is the intention, yes. Mr. Moen has been in contact with the manufacturer and as somewhere about 45 to 90-day procurement, I believe.
Yeah, once we get the grant accepted by the Board of Supervisors, which is scheduled for tomorrow, pending your guys' vote today, then we can submit the request to All Weather, and they can order the part pending the funding of the grant, and that way the clock basically starts for the procurement phase, so we'll be able to,
We have it.
yes,
Calendar year, but it's going to happen with this grant funding
correct.
cycle.
That's absolutely correct.
Good deal. Last time I flew in, probably last Friday, oh, sorry, thanks, Brian. On my last flight in and out of the airport, the transmission off the AWAS was so bad that I was only able to pick it up when I was on the ground, of all things. It does definitely need to be upgraded.
I'm not sure the transceiver is part of the upgrade. Do you know that, Brian? I'm not certain that that's the component that got the death notice, but we may have to address the transceiver in a separate manner. But part of the master plan is calling for a relocation of the AWAS. So we think that's part of the issue. We did have Carson Aviation Services, their avionics tech, come by and check it out. He thinks according to him, is slightly off frequency, and this is a crystal, it's not a tunable. So we're going to check that component out. And
That could
have it
be why
serviced.
people struggle to pick it up sometimes. And I've had that problem more than once. It's not consistent, but it occurs.
Correct.
Any further questions? No public comment heard on this item? Do I have a motion? I would entertain a motion to accept the FAA grant for AIP 332-004032 for 2018.
I'll move.
Mr. Golden has moved. Mr. Barrett has seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment on the motion? None heard. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. None heard. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item G5 for possible action. CCAA RFQ Committee to present data collected and RFQ score sheets regarding qualifications for airport architectural and engineering and planning services contract. Mr. Harris, do you want to give us a report on this? Or Mr. Moen?
I'll go ahead and take that, and because I kind of left the staff summary out of the agenda on that item. In consultation with the committee members, we created the score sheet, and we're going to submit the score sheets to all the CAA membership to review the submittals for both the planning and the architectural engineering. Lost my train of thought here. Submittals for the RFQ. And so primarily what should happen in this is during the next month, we could call a special meeting and have a meeting regarding the RFQ rankings and allow the board to walk through that process at that time. So I don't believe that a motion will be happening today on that because the RFQ committee was not a public meeting, and therefore no recommendations from the committee are going to be made to the board other than we're going to gather the submittals once the rest of the board has an opportunity to do it and then score them and rank them from there. And then I believe in your packet there is a RFQ planning and engineering next steps. And the next steps would be that we would narrow it down to 2 submittals for planning and 2 submittals for engineering. We would notify the firms that were unsuccessful at that point. and then we would gather the info, primarily review the references from both of the RFQs, and then the next step, according to the FAA advisory circular, there's a chart in there that will show you the process that we should walk through. And then once we have the short list, the reference check, we can conduct interviews, whether they be telephonic or in person. And then we can follow up with the ranking, identify the top firm, define the scope of services, get an independent fee estimate, and then proceed with negotiations from there.
Thank you. Mr. Takis.
Yeah, I just want to address one aspect of it, because I think there was some miscommunications either between me and the committee or otherwise, but I think the committee's worked very diligently to look at the applications that were filed, to collect information, and to develop a scoring sheet tool that can be used by all the authority members. And I think it was their hope that at this meeting, you guys would be in a position to rank the members. However, except for the people on the committee, the rest of you were not given the statements of qualification or the scoring tool, and so that is why I think Mr. Moen is making the recommendation that let's get that stuff all to you, schedule a special meeting so we can get this back on track so that you can rank the top firms based on their qualifications, and then once you've ranked them, then we can follow the procedures that Mr. Moen outlined, which track identically what the FAA circular says we're supposed to do, which is the next step is we would start with the top-ranked firm or firms, and then negotiate a contract. And if we're unable to negotiate a contract with them, then we go to the next ranked firms, and until we're able to get a contract that we can bring back to you for approval. And so that's a contract or two contracts, depending on how it's structured. You know, there are some firms that bid on both, or didn't bid, but gave statement of qualifications on both the architectural, engineering, and the planning, and there are some that did separate proposals. So that's what's going on. I thought it might be helpful to explain, because I know there was at least an expectation among the committee members that tonight would be the night to make those choices. And there was probably expectation among some of the people attending, and I apologize to them as well.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Takis? Mr. Rogers.
My understanding of the process was that the subcommittee would do the ranking and bring back recommendations to the board for our approval. Is that not what's going to happen?
That's exactly what I advised the authority back in April and in July that you cannot do under the open meeting law. The only thing that the committee can do is collect data. And that's it. And I know it's a weird thing. If you compare it to ordinary business, private business, you'd set up a committee, you'd have them do it, bring back a recommendation, boom, you know, the executive committee or the executive of the business would make a decision, and you'd be off and running. Unfortunately, in public entities, the law requires this open public meeting process, which prevents that kind of thing from occurring. Instead, every deliberation, decision, limiting of information has to be done by the full public body in a full public meeting. And so the job of the committee was to collect the information and build a grading tool that you guys can all use non-discriminatorily. At some point, you're going to see their recommendations in the grading tool, but you also get the opportunity to make your own, look at the applications and make your own decision. And then you guys will deliberate at an open meeting and make a decision as to how to rank them. And, you know, in all likelihood, your rankings will be different. I mean, you know, as Member Harris pointed out to me, it's very likely even among the committee, the rankings will be different. And so you're going to have a little bit of a mixed bag probably at this next meeting. You'll all come in with ideas, and that's where the debate and the deliberation begins as to, okay, how do we resolve those? Why do you think this is stronger in this category versus this one? Until you can reach a decision. That's the process. And so having a separate body do a recommendation is something that's expressly prohibited under the open meeting law. And so, again, I apologize if there was a miscommunication there earlier or misunderstanding. If it was a failure of me to clearly explain it, of course, I apologize for that. But sometimes government business is kind of hard to work through.
I appreciate that, and if it was my failure to communicate that as well, I apologize. We are going through with this process basically the same way we did with hiring our manager. A subcommittee met, they created a matrix, they actually put information into the matrix, but each one of us were given video links and printed matter to use with the same scoring tool to do our individual rankings, and that's the way it worked. That happened to come out to a regular scheduled meeting for final decision on who the members who were coming in for actual in-person interview were, but the process basically is the same for both these issues, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
If I could, I'd just like to ask a clarifying question here. I mean, and a little explanation. When we got together and did these, we were very clear that we were not going to come out with a final recommendation, that we were going to, in fact, we even made a decision not to get together in a second meeting so that we wouldn't be influencing each other. We simply agreed on a ranking approach, and then we went away to do it. And so what we were coming back with were actually 4 recommendations, not a recommendation. And I will say this, and I'm not an attorney, but I have read the handbook, and I don't see anything about the procedure that we were going to follow tonight that would have violated the open meeting law. And I'm sorry to disagree with our honorable attorney on it, but they put out a handbook for a reason, and the reason they do that is so that members of these organizations can interpret them themselves and follow the rules, and I believe we were going to do that. But I would like to, and I'm willing to disagree. I mean, I am. I understand that people can have different opinions, and certainly people have a different appetite for risk in these things. So, and anybody can sue you, and if our intention is to never be sued as the airport authority, we're going to go very slow. But I would like to ask this question. If we had said to our airport manager, please come back with a recommendation, our top 2, would that have been okay?
There are some differences in the open meeting law between having a staff make recommendations and do things versus members of the authority. I'd have to go back and research it whether the facts in this situation applied that way would have been a problem. But I mean, your recommendation that you come back with your 4 individual recommendations, that's probably okay. That's probably okay. What's not okay is for you to come in with those, give them to everybody else, and ask them to vote, where they haven't had an opportunity to look at the proposals or do their own imaginations with the evaluation and the grading. That's where we run afoul of the open meeting law. And so earlier today, when I was talking to the airport manager, we actually did discuss, well, maybe we should just send in the 4. And I told him, I thought at this point it's probably safer just to send out the matrix, the tool, and certainly before the next meeting, we will send out to all of you, all of them, and then you'll all have them, and you can go forward on that basis.
Okay, I just want to say that I think in the future, when we have these kinds of issues, or we need somebody to go away and look at them and bring them back, we need to just say, staff, do it, instead of trying to work around this ridiculous law. Now, I understand why it sits there. I understand the absolute reasons for it. Don't get me wrong, but I think what it's telling organizations like this is don't set up subcommittees and expect to get anything done. So my feeling is that we have a very competent manager, and if we want to look for the 2 top organizations to talk to for engineering or for planning or anything else that we're doing, we need to turn that over to the manager and let the manager bring back recommendations instead of trying to play this game. But I will say I'm very frustrated by this process. There are 266 pages in those submittals, and we're now talking about 7 people reading them. All right? I'm sorry. And as I said, I spent the afternoon reading that open meeting law, and it may not be a good law in terms of the way it's written, but we were complying with it. And I think that our attorney is taking a very, very cautious stance on it, which I appreciate. I think that's what attorneys are supposed to do. But I do think that airport authorities need to sometimes say, sorry, we hear you, but that's not what we're going to do.
I appreciate your input.
Question?
Mr. Barrett?
We've been talking about 4. It's actually 4 in one category, planning architecture, and 5 in the other, or am I confused?
That's right.
Okay, I just want to be sure. Secondarily, I want to state to the authority that I will be out of the state from September 12th to, I think, around the 26th or so that, and it doesn't matter in this case if I'm here, because I've already done my scoring, so, it's as have the other members, so you've got that, so I can be gone and you can just put it in. Or I can not be gone. If you take that much time, I'll be back.
Mr. Harvey?
I'm sorry, I've become a little confused. So it sounds like we had board members those were the committee, correct?
3 plus Ken.
And those board members could have taken the data, and Ken could have created a report and submitted as the staff proposal, because that's kind of how we did it the last time. We were trying to focus it that way. I really respect the fact that those members went and studied and did it, and I really am flummoxed that I would have to go and do all that work again, when I'd really love to hear what each of you heard, got your 2 cents, because to me, that would greatly influence and help us move this along. So is part of this process that we do hear from them and their input is engaged in this process? Because I'm kind of confused on what is expected to go forward, because I hate to lose all the work that's gone into this. It does not make any sense to me.
Mr. Takis?
The short answer to that is yes. I would expect that you would hear from them and get the value of their input and what they've looked at. But you also need your own independent ability to look at this. If what we're doing instead is allowing the subcommittee to make the recommendation, then we're in violation of the open meeting law. And I've had enough experience with the open meeting law that I can just tell you that flat out. That's not a gray area. That would be a violation.
And I'm not going to argue.
That's what we're trying to avoid.
I won't argue your legal point, because I know you're correct. Yeah. The point is that they can come and tell us the work they put into it. Yeah. I agree we should get the data. I don't disagree. We should all get the data so I can look at it, listen, and make my independent decision. But at the end of the day, honestly, I'm going to put a lot of credibility into the feedback of that group. I agree that we should do it right, that I should get all the data and then have their data is part of the supporting data, right, in my opinion. So what the data they each came up with, to me, is part of the data set I should be looking at.
I don't know if I'm confused, but I have been in the past, and I may be now, but I don't think I am. We actually, as Bradley said, did this separately, and I might give you my view of what I did, but we purposefully did it separately to avoid any collusive, we had a meeting, we talked about what we were going to do, what the scoring would be, and we talked about a 10 scale, and we wound up just doing 4 on the one and 5 on the other, 5 through 1, that kind of thing. So they may be completely different. Bradley may have chose one at the top, and I might have had that same one at the bottom, because we never talked about it.
Which is why it'd be valuable to have.
Discussion would be held in a public meeting, and as long as it's held in a public meeting, I think you're okay.
So are you saying that even if they're ready to report tonight, we should not accept those comments?
No, I think they can report tonight what they individually feel, but unless I think all of you have had an opportunity to look at it yourself, then what are you effectively doing? You're effectively going off the recommendation of a committee that was set up, even if it's individual members. Now, this distinction between individual members of a committee versus a committee, the first time I heard that was today. That concept had never been posited to me as a question, hey, if we do it individually, are we still acting as a committee? And that's where I think we get into some dangerous water. But certainly, if at this meeting, if the members of the committee that have already done their research on this want to give their opinions in this open meeting, that's of course okay.
I would have no objection at all to receiving the information that they generated from their review, none at all, and then receiving it and applying my own scoring sheet at a later time, going through their points, the materials that we receive, and, the input from both of them. I think I don't see that as a conflict, because I'm going to make my own decision reading through the material anyway, so.
Well, first of all, it's not both of them. The vice chairman was on this committee, and he's not here tonight. Secondarily, Ken also has his rankings. And thirdly, I turned mine in, and it was 10 days ago when I turned mine in. I'd have to go back and look at them to
Okay.
be able to, but I'm perfectly willing to do that. I do remember who I had first, but I'd have to go back to my rankings to get all of them.
Would the members, go ahead, Mr. Rogers.
So are we going to put on the website, we're going to publish 8 different rankings using the ranking system side by side with all of the data, so that it's completely public record and we can debate, and we can discuss that in an open meeting?
Yes, that is a requirement of the open meeting law. Any documents that you are discussing in your meeting have to be made available to the public.
Mr.
When could we expect to have the first 4 published?
I was just going to comment, I didn't bring the score sheets with me purposefully tonight for that, based upon our previous discussions this afternoon. So I can submit those to the committee tomorrow, and once the committee, the board, tomorrow, then they can review them, and then we should be able to publish them along with the rest of the board's information before the next meeting, whether it's regular scheduled meeting or a special meeting.
Would those be with each individual member's choices, or would they be blind copied?
Well, I'll provide the blank copies for the rest of the committee, or the rest of the board. I will provide the copies that that Member Barrett and Member Harris submitted, because I do not have anything from Member Vowell at this point in time, and then I can make my copies available as well.
Okay, so I guess my question is, do we wish to set up a date for the special meeting once those things are communicated to us?
Well, there's another agenda item about the September meeting.
Yeah.
So maybe we want to talk about those.
But that's the
in
regular
conjunction.
meeting.
Right. Maybe
I'm
we want to
talking
talk about
about-
those in
And
conjunction.
I noticed
just because
that's
of the,
after I'll be back.
Yes, me too.
The movement of the date.
Mr. Golden?
I would say I concur.
Okay, very good. Then we will hold this until the end of the committee meeting, the board meeting.
I think it makes sense to address those
To
both at
join
the
them.
same time, but I think our thinking was we would have an earlier special meeting to get the ranking done so that we can kind of get back on schedule in terms of getting somebody online, because there's additional steps that have to take place after you rank them.
Right.
And as I indicated, mine is already in, and so if you schedule that meeting while I'm not here, the special meeting, it won't matter because I've already done it. But I would really love to be here when we make the final decision.
Okay.
And what I would like is a reasonable amount of time to review the information.
You will need it.
Okay, any public comment to this point on this item? As frustrating as it may be. All right, moving forward. Item number 6, for discussion and possible action to approve Atkins Task 8 for construction management on the rehabilitation of taxiways project pending Board of Supervisors acceptance of the amended grant offer from the FAA. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Once again, Brian Fitzgerald with Atkins. Submitted the task to do the construction management of the taxiways project, and due to the time frame of when the contractor would like to start shortly after the air races, and now what seems to be an extension of getting a consultant on board, it would be imperative to approve this task to do the management of the project. So I'm submitted it in front of you. The task is approximately $49,000. It is part of the grant that just got approved by the board here and going to the Board of Supervisors tomorrow. So if there's any questions on that, I had submitted it prior, but if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Are there any questions, Mr. Fitzgerald? Any public comment or questions, Mr. Fitzgerald, on this item? None seen. Any discussion further before I ask for a motion? If not, I would move we approve the contract with Atkins to provide construction supervision conditioned on Atkins being selected as the airport engineer during the construction, if that determination has been made by the time the project ensues.
I'd move.
Okay. Mr. Golden?
I don't understand that verbiage.
Let me explain that. If Atkins is our engineer at the time the project goes forward, it makes sense for Atkins to do the project. And so whether Atkins is selected as the engineer after we go through the ranking and all that other process, or not, if they are still the engineer when this project's going forward, then you should approve this task so it can get done. And in the event that Atkins is not selected, you might still decide at that point to have Atkins do the construction management on that project, because we may be partway into that project. And so what I didn't want to do is prejudice your choice in the other process. And so I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, but that's all I was trying to convey here.
Any other questions? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Barrett. Any public comment on this item? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard. Motion carried. Okay, moving on to item number 7, for discussion and possible action to reschedule the September CCAA board meeting to September 26th from September 19th.
I think I'll be back.
One of the reasons for this is I am going to be gone to the air races from the 9th to the 16th, and then I'm going to be in California for a memorial. And I know that when we hired Mr. Moen, he had a anniversary trip planned for about the same time, and I was trying to avoid having both myself and Mr. Moen gone for the meeting.
I was glad to see this. I'm not going to be here on the 19th, so I'm going to be out.
Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, I will not be here. I can make any other night that week, but unfortunately, I can't make that evening.
The 26th?
Correct.
And if I can muddy the water just a little bit more, I did reach out to Tamara and ask her about the availability of this room for that period, and it is not available on the 26th in the afternoon, but, excuse me, in the evening. But it may be, she did make a suggestion that perhaps we could move the time of the meeting till noon, that the room would be available different times during the week on that. One was noon on the 26th, I can confirm
Anytime
that.
that day, just that, I can't do the night. So,
Would noon cause a difficulty for anybody?
Oh,
Will there be pizza?
I would make sure.
I wouldn't be too keen on noon, but I'll make the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to be here on the 19th, so this was a fortuitous discussion. Okay, I'm okay with it.
I think the one thing we have to look up is the availability of the room, and Tamar just said she had no internet at the moment, so she's not able to do that, but maybe if it comes back up, she can check, but there were a couple dates during that.
Otherwise, we do it at the terminal building.
Right.
Pick another date.
Or we could go to the terminal building, but that means we gotta bring all the recording equipment and all that brouhaha. Well, we're looking at Wednesday the 26th. And then the other date you mentioned to me was Friday the 28th at noon.
I logged in as guest, so I've got a calendar in front of me, and I'm looking at September right now. We can do 24th and the 25th. It doesn't say that there are meetings, but I know there are because I'm part of them. So we can do any time during the day that week, actually.
So the 26th at noon would be acceptable?
We could do that. As long as it's not on a Thursday, the board meets on Thursdays.
So Wednesday the 26th at 12 p.m.?
Well, is that the third Thursday?
No, it's not. It's the fourth week, yeah.
Yeah, so, no, I'm just saying, I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting go to Thursday, but I don't think the board meets on that Thursday.
Yeah.
Mr. Takis, would that be an open time for you?
Yes, 26 works for me.
Okay.
At noon?
At noon or
Noon's fine with
anytime.
me. Yeah, noon's fine with me.
We have pizza coming.
Yeah, I'll buy the pizza. So does anybody have an objection to the 26th at noon?
I don't have an objection, I don't have my calendar with me, but it's on another tablet, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I'm back. I think I
Okay.
come back out previous Monday.
Okay. All right. I would accept a motion to set the September CCA meeting for noon on September 26th.
Also move.
I have a motion by Mr. Golden and a second by Mr. Harvey. Any public comment on this item?
Yeah, Madam Chair, the only thing is the Planning Commission starts at 5, so we're good.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. Or we'll have to get more pizza.
Yeah, a lot of pizza, Bradley, a lot of pizza.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? No public comment heard? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard, motion carries.
I'm sorry, who moved and seconded?
Golden and Harvey.
Thank you.
Now, moving on to reconsideration of item number 5. As far as setting the special meeting for collecting the information and gathering our assessments of this. As I said, I'm going to be out of town from the 9th, so I would like to have it sometime before the 9th. Is that too short a period of time, do you think?
No, I'd like to see it happen in August.
Yeah, so would I.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sometime the end of August?
Yeah.
Are you still looking at the calendar, Tamar?
I can go back. No
Okay.
problem.
That means I can be here for both, maybe.
Pardon?
I don't leave till September 12th, so I'll be here.
Not that it matters, your schedules are more important, but I will not be here the last week of August. I will not be here the last week of August. The 3rd is Labor Day. The 4th would be like the first business day. That's a Tuesday. So,
Is anything available on the 4th?
yeah, I'll be back on the 4th. I'll be here.
4th? Is that okay with you?
The 5th, the 5th is open as well.
Well, let's try for 6 PM on the 4th. Mr. Harris, is that okay with you?
great.
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah, that works for me. All right. After looking through this, any comment on, from the staff table over there on the 4th? Is everybody available on the 4th?
I'll be here.
And that, yeah, okay. And any public comment on the 4th? None heard. I would entertain a motion to set a special meeting of this Carson City Airport Authority on Tuesday, September 4th at 6 PM.
I'll move.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Golden, second by Mr. Rogers. Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Oh, Mr. Rogers.
I would just like to, when you talked about this meeting originally, you talked about it being a data gathering meeting where we're just going to gather the data from all of the board members. I'm assuming that we're going to do that and then we're going to make a decision, right? I wanted that to be on record. The intent of this meeting is to have a plan when we're done. Yes?
Right. This meeting will be the meeting where you'll deliberate on each other's recommendations and you will come to a decision as to how to rank the firms, which should allow the airport manager and myself to negotiate, go to the next step, which is try and negotiate rates. And then once we get a negotiated contract, we can come back to you. There's also one other step where we have to get some comparison numbers, and I'm not sure exactly how we do that, but we'll figure that out. But yes.
Mr. Golden.
2 questions on this one. I trust that between now and then, sooner than later, those of us who are not on the subcommittee will be tendered the information on all firms.
Oh, yeah, I think
On the
it's
website.
been made available to you already. I mean,
Okay.
but that was just today.
Just today. Okay, I can download it off the website. And then
I sent a link, and there's the score sheets are on there too.
that was the email. Okay, got it. Okay, so it is available now.
I'll send the PDFs just to save you the time of downloading
Uh,
them from the web.
I can download it from the web. We're good. And then,
It's available, Michael.
okay, so it was made available today is what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
Okay, that answers that question. Then Bradley, you gonna bring pizza for that too? I just want, I want to know, it's an important question.
Be careful what you start.
You know what?
Be careful what you start.
How about gumbo or something like that? Would that be all right?
Oh, yeah. All right. Having heard no public comment, had discussion on the motion, we have a motion by Mr. Golden, a second by Mr. Rogers. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. None heard, motion carries. All right. Moving along to the airport engineers report.
I have nothing new to add. All my items have been heard at this time, but if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have specific questions of Mr. Fitzgerald? None heard. We will move on to the airport manager's report.
Last night, the CAP and the FAA hosted a fast safety meeting at our facility on Terminal Way. We had 36 attendees for that. They discussed aviation weather forecasting and fuel management, as well as wake turbulence and other issues. There was a report, the NTSB recently issued a report concerning the Bonanza crash at RNO about 2 years ago by Flying Star Aero owner John Brown. And so they were using some of the lessons or some of the findings from that report in that meeting last night. So it was well attended. The Airport Council, I'll be attending the Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30 to ask for their grant acceptance for AIP 32. I'm continuing to get Gary Province some additional training. He's going to go to the National Weather Service on Thursday, the 23rd of August, to get some, learn how to read a TAF, a terminal area forecast, and get some other training on aviation weather. We did discover a little faux pas in our IFR operations out at Carson Airport. When the visibility on Monday was down below a mile, or below VFR minimum, was like 1.25 miles, the beacon does not come on by itself. And so we discovered that we did not have access to the beacon tower, being that it's sublet to Verizon and AT&T, and AT&T has as part of their agreement to maintain that facility. So we were able now to have access to that. It is going to require us to manually go out there and override the sensor to get the beacon to turn on. But I did talk to a couple other airports locally, Minden, Douglas, as well as, well, that was the primary one that I spoke with, how they do it, and they do the same thing. They go out there and they cover up the photocell to get the beacon to come on. They do have staffing later times of the day, so the problem is if we're not there, the beacon's not going to come on. Obviously, the information is available on the AWAS, but I did speak to All Weather, and there's no FAA-approved method between the AWAS and the beacons to communicate and be able to turn that on and off. So we're going to dig into that a little bit, see if we can come up with a workaround. But I'll keep you posted on that. I did find that interesting that when we do have a GA airport, like where there's majority of VFR operations, that they can't just merely look out the window and go, oh yeah, the beacon's on, we're below minima. So obviously the AWAS is important for people to monitor. I did have a conversation with several of the members regarding our new email system. If you have not spoken with JFG, please do so we can get that tied up. One thing what we've done when we created this, there's no real website that you're able to access your email unless you do it through like a Exchange server like Outlook. So they'll assist with doing that for you. But just reach out, get that done. They're kind of wanting to close out their contract with us on that project, and so I encourage you to do that. And if you need help, please call me. John, remember Barrett, you're all squared away. We're just using his carson.org email, but the rest of the membership should be getting the new email.
I might add there that it took me about 15 minutes working with the fellow at the end of the phone, even though it wasn't the one you had listed.
Oh, okay.
And he walked me right through it, came on and did a remote involvement with my screen and so forth, and we got it done, and it was seamless.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I don't have an update on a traffic count for us. We're working on trying to play with that ADS-B system and be able to get reports. But what I did think that would be of value is to discuss the fuel flowage from month to month. Because fuel flowage really is an indication of activity. It doesn't mean everybody who comes on the airport buys fuel, but it is a good indication what our local base is doing. In June of 2018, maybe that had to do with the open house, I'm not sure, but we sold 3,300 gallons of avgas, and that seems to be a little bit higher than the norm. That's the.
Not in the month of June, no.
No, that was the report I got from.
Oh, that's from the truck.
Okay. Oh, the purchase amount of fuel?
In other words,
Okay.
there's self-serve and full-serve.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's self-serve and full-serve. The self-serve sells far more avgas than our trucks do. So I don't know if 3,300 is high, low, or indifferent. Seems to be quite a bit. The self-serve generally moves through 10, 12, 14,000 gallons a month, but that's combined. When I send you that report, that's Jet A and avgas combined. I don't have a breakdown so easily to provide in a nice clean report like that. I can tell you July's sales were down a little bit from last year, and I actually think it's because of all the smoke we've had over the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, the number I have was 933 gallons, which is a big difference from June, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that our total sales from our full-service operations were only down about 500 gallons. So lots of jet fuel going out the door off the trucks. I know off the self-serve, we were down about 2,000 gallons. And again, I think a lot of it had to do with smoke, because I was flying around in that smoke, and there were a couple of days where it was hard IMC. So,
Well, the numbers I have for Jet A for June were 13,381, and then July was 15,465. So quite a bit of difference between the low lead and the Jet A. But I just thought that was an interesting way to look at the operations on our airfield. Lastly, I'm in a preliminary discussion. I want to get the board's feel just over time. It's certainly not something to vote on or anything of that nature. But we've been discussing with the CAP about the possibility of doing a fun run at the airport, invite the community out. And we're looking at doing it in November around Veterans Day. Veterans Day itself is a Sunday, so we're thinking maybe November 10th, a Saturday, do like a 5K on our airfield. We might require a closure, obviously, if we're going to be on the movement areas, but I think we can get a 5K course out there, be over the pavement surfaces, and just, give an opportunity for the community to come out, help raise some money for some veterans groups, and, get people on our airfield and have a better understanding of what that looks like. Nothing firm, hasn't been socialized any further than we're just talking about it now. There are some other activities that we're talking about in the future, perhaps like a community FOD walk, and just other opportunities to get people out on our airfield, see what's going on, and become more familiar with it and what happens out there. But that's it. That's all I've got right now.
Any questions of Mr. Moen? Moving on to the legal counsel's report.
I don't have anything additional.
Thank you, Mr. Takis. And the treasurer's report. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You all have the information in front of you. So if we look at from last year, profit and loss compared to the year before, in both cases against budget and against last year, obviously we did very well. We are up about 7% from last year. We obviously budgeted a lower number, concerned about some changes were made, but we not only did that, but we also come in much less on our expenses. So you'll all see that our net income came out strong against our budget. And so we're starting off our new year well. So that's a good sign for the budget process as we get started, and opportunities, hopefully, as we move forward into the new year.
Thank you. Do I have any reports from authority members on projects or communications, correspondence, that sort of thing? I don't have anything to report myself. Hearing nothing, no further comments or reports. We'll move to public comment. Anyone in the audience who wish to address the airport authority may speak on the items discussed on the agenda or related to the airport. Do we have any public comment at this time? None heard. Anyone have item in? Anyone having agenda items for the next regular meeting, please contact our manager. And do I have any other further comments or discussion items before we adjourn? Hearing none, we are adjourned.